morning. Welcome to the 15th annual Ariel Avrech Yahrzeit Lecture. Thank you all for joining us. Please silence your phones. We would greatly appreciate it if you'd sign your name in the guest book, which sits at the entrance on the table. Planning this lecture is a big job and could not be done without Rebecca Jalali. Rebecca nimbly coordinates our shul's many fine programs. In addition, Rebecca keeps me up to date on the best films from Bollywood. And over the course of the 2-year Young Israel of Century City construction, Rebecca worked heroically from a small and inconvenient office. She deserves our thanks in more ways than we can express. During Ariel's long illness, there was one man who always sat by Ariel's side, Rabbi Elazar Muskin. A previous commitment to officiate at an East Coast wedding prevented Rabbi Muskin from being here today, but it's all the more reason that this lecture will be posted at the Young Israel website. Ariel loved being with his friends, and so a gathering like this is exquisitely attuned to his soul. This year we have the extra pleasure of welcoming Ariel's beloved sisters, Lita and Eliza, who live on the East Coast, to this lecture. In addition, it is our pleasure to welcome Eliza's in-laws, Glenn and Karen Cohn, all the way from Ir HaKodesh, Hillcrest, Queens, to this special memorial. This morning's program will proceed as follows. Jonathan Beck, Ariel's friend from Ner Yisrael and our neighbor down the block on Cardiff Avenue, will give his remembrance of Arielle. Afterwards, after Jonathan, Jackie Danicki will deliver the Ariel Avrech Yahrzeit lecture, followed by a question and answer period. The Kel Malei Rachamim will be recited, after which I will say Kaddish to Rabbanan, and then you are all invited to a brunch. I am honored to turn the podium over to Jonathan Beck.
Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Avrech, for the special zchus to talk about Ariel and share my memory of him. Every year, I find this event to be remarkable in many ways. The first, the introductory comments by an old friend of Ariel, different friends over the years who've had different experiences with Ariel, some from high school, post-high school, pre-high school. Ariel and I were in Ner Yisrael together. And we had a common family friend. So when I came to Ner Yisrael, I was told about this young man, Ariel Avrech, and we became very close friends right away. I had the honor, the zchus, of taking Ariel to his medical appointments, and we became friends and we got to talk a lot, and Ariel, though he was younger than me, was definitely more of a role model to me. When I was in Ariel's presence, I felt like I was in the presence of a great person. When I think back on my years in Ner Yisrael and I try to remember where people sat, it's a huge base medrash with hundreds of people, and if you would ask me, where did anyone sit, aside from the few rebbeim that sat at the front of the yeshiva, I couldn't tell you. But if you ask me where Ariel sat, I could tell you exactly where he sat. The sight of him sitting and learning with such tranquility and with such love is something that I will never forget. So I know Ariel as Ariel the Masmid, Ariel the yeshiva bacher, who had such a love for learning Torah that it was just quite remarkable. You know, there's a song, I thought it was a Zohar, but apparently it's not. There's a song that's sang in yeshivas all around the world. The song apparently was sang by the Vilna Gaon. The song goes as follows. I'm not going to sing it, don't worry. Lousy voice. Kad Yasvin Yisrael, the Askin B'Simchas HaTorah, when a Jew is sitting and toiling in the happiness of Torah. Kudsha Brichu Omer LePamal Yadilei, Hashem says to his heavenly court, his angels, Chazu, Chazu, Banai Chaviv, I look at my beloved children, they forget their own tsaras. The askin bechedva sadili, and they toil, they're engrossed in that which is beloved to me. Ariel had a lot of excuses not to show up to Seder, to learning sessions on time. He had a lot of excuses not to give his all when he was learning Torah. But none of that stopped him. You know, just the thought of him sitting in that base medrash, even between Sidarim, when everyone else was eating and playing and enjoying, I could picture Ariel, as I'm sure the other guys from Ner Yisrael that were there at the same time could attest to. He had his notebook in front of him. He would write up the summary of what we were learning, and he would just be engrossed. And even when I would take Ariel to his medical appointments, and you think, maybe there was some apprehension, a little bit of anxiety, he was very peaceful. He had this sense of inner peace. I don't know for sure where it came from. I'm sure from many places. As the pasuk in Tehillim says, Torah Hashem temima meshivas nafesh, that Torah is perfect, it's complete, and it restores the soul. I think for sure that Ariel's one of the sources of Ariel's inner tranquility was this connection that he had to Torah. He was so at peace. The other, I was told I have about 5 to 7 minutes. I think to really properly speak about Ariel, I don't think 5 to 7 hours would be enough. But I really want to focus on 2 things. So point number 1 is that, again, with all the excuses that he could have made not to be fully engrossed, Ariel didn't just learn Torah, but he had a simchas Torah. And I'm sure when Hashem was looking down at Ariel learning, Hashem was singing that song, Chazu, Chazu, Banai Chavivai, look at my beloved child. He has every tzara. He had tzaras, it was hard for him. But the mishtachin tzara d'Elohim, he forgot his tzaras. When he was learning, it was as if his tzaras didn't exist. No excuses. And he just enjoyed that learning so much. As a matter of fact, there's a Gemara Baba Basra that says that, one of the Tanaim went up to Shemayim, and they asked him a whole bunch of questions. What did you see when you went up to Shemayim? And one of the responses was Asher Misha Balakan, praiseworthy is the person that comes here, Talmudo biyado, and his learning is in his hands. So what does that mean? Person that came here and his learning is in his hands. So the Maharsha says, because if a person writes down his learning when he learns, he writes up his chidushim, he writes summaries of what he's learning, he takes that with him forever. So the Tana was saying, you go up to Shemayim, the people that write down their notes, their Torah, when they leave this world, they go up to the next world, that accompanies them. That's what he was saying. The other point about Ariel is that, on that same point, it was just always interesting. From what I remember, it's been some time, whenever we went to his medical appointments, from what I recall, they were always Friday afternoon when we didn't have yeshiva, when we had off. I really don't recall a time when we ever went during the week, and I would imagine that was carefully done by Ariel, if I recall correctly. The other thing, among the many spectacular things about Ariel, is that Ariel, he never complained, he never kvetched, never complained, and he said the bracha of Asher Yatzar with an incredible amount of kavanah. Now, the bracha of Asher Yatzar is really a bracha about thanking Hashem for our health, and you would think, again, someone whose health is not in the greatest state, maybe that wouldn't be the bracha that he'd have the most kavanah for. But you see, he didn't take anything for granted. The health that he had, the koach and the life that he had, everything, he was so appreciative. And he said that bracha with such kavanah, it was like I could see him in the hallway of the yeshiva, and he would stop. Half of us, if you're even lucky enough to say the bracha, we can't even remember, did we say the bracha, did we not say? We have to think a half hour if we said it or not. We're probably doing 10 different things. Ariel, he stood, he was serious, he contemplated, and he was just so appreciative of everything that he had. So not only did he not complain, but he was so thankful. And one of the interesting things of the bracha in Asher Yatzar, it ends off as Rofei Chol Basar. Hashem heals every person. Umafli la'asos. He does wondrous things. The Shulchan Aruch says, what is mafli? What's wondrous? It's wondrous to have one person where within one person you have a neshama and a guf. You have a soul and a body. It's a pella. So how could you have such a thing where you have a soul and a body together? Most of us don't think about that because we just so identify ourselves as bodies that we forget about the soul. But when Ariel would say that bracha, you could see a person that was so much more soul than body. He was all soul. And you look at him and say, how could this be that you have this one thing and such a powerful soul and a body together at the same time? You could see it's a pella. Just one funny anecdote where I once thought I sensed a material side to Ariel. I think it was either right before, it was a special privilege for me. Ariel was at my wedding 16 years ago. we have a picture I think we gave to you. He had such a radiant smile at the wedding. It was like one of the highlights of my wedding I'll never forget. I don't know if it was right before or after the wedding. My wife and I went to visit Ariel, and my wife asked him, "Is there anything I can do for you? Can I cook you something?" So Ariel turned to my wife and he said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, there's something I would like." So, do you remember what it was? Bang, you got it. He asked for tongue. But he didn't want the tongue that you can go to like PKD and, the tongue looks like the corned beef you can't differentiate with. He wanted a real tongue. And my wife had never made a tongue before. And if you go to the butcher and ask for a tongue, it doesn't look like, it doesn't look like anything else. So I was thinking, I finally figured Ariel's a regular person. But then I was thinking, when we know about Malachim in the Torah, do Malachim ever eat? Well, there's one time we know that angels ate. When did angels eat? By Avraham Avinu. What did the angels eat? What meat did the angels eat? What does Rashi say the meat the angels ate? Tongue. Yes, Rashi says that the angels ate tongue. I said, see, even though I thought Ariel was just a physical, even the food he ate was angelic. That was just an incredible memory. Now that I live on the same block as the Avrechs, I wish I lived on the block many years earlier, though. Years earlier, I'm from the East Coast. It would have been worthwhile to live in California earlier, avoid all the snowy winters, and spend time with Ariel. So, my memories of Ariel, the two takeaways, I would say, is one, whenever we feel like we have an excuse, we don't want to go to a shiur, we don't want to learn, we're feeling tired, we feel like we have every excuse in the world, Ariel legitimately had every excuse in the world, but he didn't use it. And I think the reason why he didn't use it, he had such an enjoyment. He was such an example of what it means to truly enjoy Yiddishkeit, to be so connected to Hashem and to be so connected to learning. I don't even know if it was a struggle for him. I think he was so in love with learning that. So point number one, if we're ever feeling that, we're a little bit tired, which a little bit, not in the mood to go to learn or to hear a shiur, I think Ariel is a mechayev. Ariel obligates us. And maybe even if we do it one time, it would be an extra schus for his neshama, number one. Number two is when we think about our own health and we take it for granted, again, I think it would be a nice thing to think about Ariel. We have that opportunity to say Asher Yatzar, to thank Hashem, multiple times a day for whatever health we have. I think, again, it would be a nice thing to think about Ariel, a person that never took anything for granted, who's very appreciative. And even if it's just one time that we have that memory and have an extra little kavanah, I think it would be an amazing schus for his neshama. So thank you, and I hope today is a aliyah for his neshama.
In May of 2004, I started writing a blog about Ariel. Karen and I named it Seraphic Secret, symbolizing the angelic name Ariel as cited in Kedusha. The very first comment about the blog post was from someone named Jackie Danicki. The comment was sensitive and highly articulate. Over the next few months, I developed an online correspondence with Jackie. I learned that she was a woman from the Midwest, that she was not Jewish, and that she was living and working in London. I sensed a special soul in Jackie's incredibly literate and knowing emails. Soon she was typing ZT'L, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, whenever she wrote Ariel's name. As you can imagine, this detail made a big impression on me. In the summer of 2004, after her first year at Stern College, our daughter Lida, along with two friends, decided to tour Europe. When the girls arrived in London, they discovered that their hotel reservations somehow went missing. They had no place to stay. I called Jackie and asked if she could help them out. Jackie insisted that the girls stay with her flat for their full London visit. Jackie is so modest that when I reminded her of her most generous hospitality, she barely remembered it ever happening. Not too long afterwards, Jackie visited LA. Karen and I met her for the first time. In my diary, which I've been keeping for 40 years, I wrote that Jackie, quote, seemed to be a deeply religious person who might have been born into the wrong religion. It turns out that my intuition was correct. Thus, Jackie Danicki is our featured speaker today. Jackie's presence here and among Klal Yisrael can be attributed to Ariel's holy neshama. Jackie Danicki has worked in startups and innovation for 20 years. She consults companies on business and media strategy, as well as partnerships and content. Born in Ohio, she lived in the UK for a decade before moving to Silicon Valley and then New York. Jackie now splits her time between New York City and Atlanta, where she is part of the vibrant Young Israel of Toco Hills community. Ladies and gentlemen, Jackie Danicki.
Thank you, Robert, for that. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I brought one of Ariel's Pez dispensers because I'm probably going to sob my guts out up here. And I thought that if I looked at something kind of not so serious, it would remind me not to take myself too seriously. So yeah, I'm going to try not to cry. It's been an intense week, especially leading up to this, and I thought I only had enough tears for one night, but it turned out I had enough tears for 8 nights. So first I want to say that everything I'm going to share with you is a combination of my experience, but also my opinions. So I could err in my opinions. I'm not a Rabbi Riskin or Rabbi Sachs or even a Shmuley Boteach, so please forgive me if I, make any errors. It's not on purpose. I kind of feel like I used to always want all the answers, and now I feel like I don't even know all the questions. And every time I get an answer, I have 6 more questions. So this is really a talk that I never thought I would give. I would never have agreed to speak publicly on this topic, mostly because it's going to live on the internet forever. But if anyone other than Robert and Karen had asked me, I probably would have said no. But I could never say no to them for anything. I've got water, thank you. And somebody has an extra in case I run out of it. But, especially because they asked in the name of Arielle, blessed memory. So, as you might wonder, why wouldn't I want to give this talk? And someone once said, I undertook converting so that I could become a Jew, not to become a convert. And so there is an element of not wanting your permanent identity to be a convert. But at the same time, my thought is, if this can help someone else, then I should do it and not just think of my own selfish, I can't control whether or not somebody thinks of me that way forever, and I can maybe influence it, but it's out of my hands. So, the identity comes with some costs. I don't know if anyone has ever come to you who doesn't even know your name and starts asking you about your deepest spiritual experiences and thoughts and life story, but that's an experience I have a lot. And if I'm comfortable with the person, if we're friends, I will, kind of explain it to them. If we're not, I'll say, well, that's a long story. I say, no, I want to hear. I have time. And so maybe, it's emotional. I don't want to, it's okay. You can cry in front of me. Okay. Well, maybe when we know each other better, you can trust me. I won't tell anybody. So it can be difficult and tricky to navigate that. The other reason it's hard to talk about is that it's really impossible, I feel, to articulate everything I'd like to share with you. I had about a year's notice that I'd be giving this talk, and I spent a year, in my readings and my learning. I would see things and go, oh my gosh, that's so relevant. I have to put that into the talk. Of course, this always happened on Shabbos. So... and I would have ideas when I was walking to shul, and it would be like, just remember this after Shabbos, and it would all go. So, I know it can't be perfect or encapsulate everything. So to answer the title of this talk, what's a nice goy? And by the way, I'm not that nice. But what's a nice goy like you doing in an Eruv like this? So just a little spoiler alert, which is as of this past Thursday.
Look at the past.
Look at the past. I'm not going. And my name, my Hebrew name is Ahava Ariel. By Abraham Avinu. The timing of this has been very inspired. I did not have a final date for the mikvah for a long time, not until the week before it happened. And I needed to book my flights to come here. I knew it would, but when I went to the mikvah on June 7th, which this year corresponded with the yard site of Karen's father, Rabbi Philip Harris Singer, blessed memory. The head of my Beit Din was Rabbi Kenneth Alman from Young Israel Flatbush, and he was a colleague of Rabbi Singer's many years ago. When I told him we had this connection, he was like, how do you have a connection to somebody so esteemed like from Flatbush? So I just, I told him a bit about my relationship with the Avrechs. So it was very special to me to have that connection, to Karen's family in that. And at the same time, my shul, Young Israel Tuckle Hills, has an amazing Yoatzet Halacha, Tova Warburg-Sinensky. And we figured out the other day that she's cousins with Robert's stepmother, Sylvia. So it's nice to have that connection. And, Rabbi Singer sat next to me at the very first Shabbat dinner I ever attended, which of course was at the Avrech home. And it wasn't that long ago. It was in 2005 by my calculation. So he sat next to me. I had hundreds of questions, but I limited myself to dozens of questions. And, I learned a lot from him just in that one conversation. And, only as I've learned more and become more integrated into Jewish communities, I realized how unlikely it would be for someone like me, born in the middle, born in some random Ohio city, growing up on a farm, living in London at the time, to ever encounter this family, let alone be welcomed and treated, like part of the family. So, I think that people always want to know how I got here. It's a long story. So I only have 40 minutes, so I'll speed you through the most embarrassing parts, which is my entire life, basically. But, and I will say that my story involves other people, and specifically family. And, their stories of how they feel about this and react to this are really not mine to tell. So, Lashon Hara, not that I'm going to speak, I would speak, evil speech, but just the idea of talking about people is a very nuanced topic to me. I think I would spend an entire lifetime really trying to wrap my hands around it. But I will try to do that very studiously here and avoid, speaking about other people who I can't speak on their behalf, especially since this is going to live forever online. So I do actually think that all of our stories, whether we are from birth, BT, convert, are all the same. We were at Har Sinai, and now we're here in this room together. The details are different, but I think that in general, that's kind of the story. But I will cut to my real story. I'm not going to cheat you out of that. So when I was very young, before kindergarten, somebody had bought me an illustrated multi-book volume of children's Bibles, or is it the Bible in illustrated form, but the Christian Bible. I wasn't really into it, but there was one story that I was completely transfixed by, which was the story of Moshe and how his mother had to let him go in order to save him, and then how he was rescued by Pharaoh's daughter, and what happened, and that, he ended up becoming this great man, which great doesn't even do him justice, but that he was able to overcome so much, including his own self-doubts, to do something so, incredible. So I was very inspired by that and the perseverance that I detected among the Jewish people, and just thinking, like, these are people who have overcome so much over thousands of years, and like, I would like to be with people like that. So it was always in my head. It was something I read about a lot. To my knowledge, I didn't even meet a Jew for the first time until I was 15. And it was a doctor 50 miles away that I had to go to. So my little farm town did not have, a shul or a yeshiva or anything like that. But yeah, as Robert noted, I started corresponding with him shortly after Arielle was niftar, and he had been writing stories, essays for the Jewish Journal and other publications about Arielle and what he and Karen were experiencing, and very beautiful, very moving. And I wrote him an email, total stranger out of the blue, and just expressed my condolences and how beautiful I thought, his tributes were, and how fortunate Arielle was to have such an amazing family. So we started, going back and forth, and, I had found Robert's pieces in the Jewish Journal through a woman named Kathy Seip, who she passed away 12 years ago now. But, Kathy was one of those people, once you met her, you knew everybody you needed to know in LA. So I was lucky that the first time I came to LA, I kind of, was introduced to lots of people, but, she had been sick for many years with cancer, and she knew how it would end, and her stated goal was, I just have to get my daughter through high school. I just want to see Maya go through high school. So there was a sense of limited time, I think, and I think that she really took a lot of solace in reading about Arielle. And so Robert had actually gone and met up with Kathy and her daughter Maya at the farmer's market one day in LA, and took these just gorgeous pictures of them together. And I sent him an email and said, I think you really captured something with them. And Robert wrote back to me and said, by the way, he wrote me this email 14 years ago today. He said, I had a wonderful time yesterday with Maya and Kathy. Since Arielle died, I have not really been capable of sitting and interacting with people on a normal level. Usually I'm so uncomfortable that I cut things short and just escape to my office. But Maya and Kathy have a particularly powerful effect on me, and the time we spent in farmer's market was a real blessing. So we hadn't met in person, but we had this connection, which is why I think he felt comfortable to send his daughter to my home, even though we had never met. So we had been corresponding for several months, and, somewhere along the way he started his blog, and the more Robert wrote about Arielle, the more I needed to know about Arielle. And we would email a lot about him, and on June 11th, 2004, I emailed Robert about a day that I had spent running around London, running errands, and I sat on the top deck of a big red bus and looked out at the clouds and thought about Arielle. I don't know why. I almost felt like he was sitting next to me. I know this sounds crazy. So rereading this, I really cringe, because it could have been insensitive to somebody in mourning, or presumptuous of me, though, he'd be very justified and have felt or thought either of those things. But he simply replied, I'm glad you had a nice ride with Arielle. But little did we all expect that my ride with Arielle would continue for more than a decade. We don't have enough time for me to tell you about every moment of my life that Arielle and the Avrech family have made meaningful, enlightening, positive, or just really fun. So here are some highlights. Lita's wedding was my first Jewish wedding. It was full of surprises. Kathy Sipe and I went to the wedding together, and we walked into the hotel, and we saw all of this food. There's like a roast beef station, and a pasta station, and a sushi station, and a salad station, and dessert station. And Kathy said, "Did we miss the wedding?" And Robert, and it was all from Pat's too, so something there. But, Robert said, "No, we're Jews. We eat first, we need energy to dance, and then we eat again." So I was like, okay, I kind of can get with this religion. But the other thing that made a really, really huge impression on me was the fact that everyone at the wedding was really at the wedding. Everyone was so present and so full of genuine joy and wanted to be there and just putting everything they had into celebrating, this marriage, this couple. And, I was married when I was very young in London. I was 21. And it was a civil ceremony. There was no big thing afterwards. It didn't last very long. No children. But my experience of going to weddings was that usually a lot of people are like, when is this going to be over? When can we leave? There was none of that at Lita's wedding. So I just kind of thought, how could I ever get remarried and not have an Orthodox wedding? But you kind of have to be Jewish, right? So my first Pesach meal was also at Lita's house in Teaneck. And I vividly remember being moved to tears by three things. First, the words of Dayenu. It took really no effort to overlay my own life experiences with, this gratitude for how much had been, done for me. Things that I could never have done for myself had really been done for me, by Hashem. Second, every time I bench, I would bench in Hebrew for a long time, and then I decided, I should try this in English, so I really know what I'm saying. And, when we read that those who sow in tears will reap with songs of joy. He who goes along weeping, carrying the bag of seed, he will surely return with songs of joy, carrying his sheaves. So that still gives me a lump in my throat when I read it. So, sitting at the table with these people who have been so generous to me and hospitable year after year, I felt a fulfillment of that promise in that moment. So I, spent 2 more Pesachim with the Avrechs, their daughters, sons-in-law, and grandchildren. I've also spent 2, Sukkot with them in Teaneck. And every time I see Lita's oldest daughter, Maya, she says, "Are you Jewish yet?" So we went to a Pesach resort in Nevada this past Pesach, which very generous for Robert and Karen to invite me. And when Lita and Maya told me that Maya had written a school paper about this Gentile who's trying to be Jewish who comes to their meals or holidays, it kind of struck me that I wasn't alone in this. I wasn't the only one that cared that this was going on, that I was making this effort. So other people were interested and they wanted me to do well. I was so surprised and very touched, and I cried, of course. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So in 2016, I decided that after this lifetime of feeling I wanted to take this step, but feeling it was too daunting and maybe impossible, I just got to a point where I wanted to pursue a formal conversion process. And Robert and Karen, who I'm bombarded with hundreds of questions over the years, and had undertaken I learned a lot from them, and I had undertaken my own self-guided study. I went to Israel a couple times. I went to Egypt and saw the spot. There's a well where supposedly, Moses was brought out of the Nile, and all this kind of very mean. I met one of the last Jews in Egypt, and this was 2005. So at the time, he said, there are about 50 of us, and now, single digits, if anything. And he gave me a star-dated pendant, which I still have and is very meaningful. So I decided I wanted to start this formal process, and Robert and Karen suggested, why don't you dip your toe in the water before you really go, full blast? And they said, why don't you start with a conservative conversion, and you can decide whether, you'd like to take on, orthodoxy based on that experience. So there's a person named Ahuva Gray, and I found a quote that I really love, which is, when God told Abraham to go to the land that I will show you, why didn't he tell Abraham the destination? Because knowing where you were going gives you a sense of autonomy and control. The ultimate act of faith is to give up your will to the will of God. When you truly let go, you become an instrument for the will of God in this world. So I found a shul at that time I moved from New York City to Jersey City, and I found a shul in Hoboken, United Synagogue of Hoboken, Rabbi Robert Scheinberg, and they were getting ready to start a class that was, kind of a 7-month class, I think, weekly. And I spoke to him and I said, I want to be honest with you. I think I'm probably going to end up doing an Orthodox conversion. And he said to me, do the conversion that will let you hang out with the people you want to hang out with. And that was Orthodox people. But what I will say is, with all of the politics around different denominations and things like that, that shul prepared me so well for the next step. It's a very traditional conservative shul in terms of the services and what's done, and kashrut is observed for the kiddush and everything. And it really gave me, I knew what to do in a service. I know when you stand. I know when you sit down. I know I memorized a lot of the the prayers and stuff. So it was really helpful. I think if I had been dropped into an Orthodox shul at that point, I think I would have been very discouraged and kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't do this. And by the way, I've heard a lot of Balei Teshuva feel the same thing. Like they walk in and it's very intimidating because they don't know. So if you ever see somebody who looks like they don't know what they're doing, it's always great to, and I've done this myself, to kind of help them find where we are and in the services and feel less like like they don't know what they're doing. So in USH, Rabbi Scheinberg has the most beautiful voice in his davening, and it was just very meaningful to me. I could never not cry in shul. And his wife, Rabbi Naomi Kalish, has also been amazing to me, and they've become like family, really, and I go as often as I can to see them. And they've been very supportive of me pursuing an Orthodox conversion. So when I decided this, I had a dilemma of where to go. I kind of want to get out of New York. I heard a lot about kind of the Upper West Side scene, and I kind of didn't want to go back to that. I didn't want to go back to that. And I didn't, want to move to like Muncie or Passaic. I just felt like I needed to find a middle ground that wouldn't be too overwhelming. So I have people in LA, and my best friend had just moved to Atlanta. And so I thought I need to go somewhere where I have people. And a friend of mine, my friend Kira Markowitz, who is she's a columnist in the New York Post, she's amazing, you should read her. She said talk to Bethany Mandel, who had converted, and she's been very outspoken about her experience. She converted with Rabbi Frembel and had, been involved with the RCA's committee on how do we, kind of revamp this process and make it, better. And so I sent Bethany a message, an email saying, either Atlanta or LA, what do you think? And she said, if I could do this all over again, I would go to Atlanta and work with Adam Starr. So she made an email introduction right that second to Rabbi Starr. And Rabbi Starr, who is, as most congregational rabbis are, incredibly busy, happened to be at his computer then and said, I'm here, call me if you want to talk. I called him right then. We spoke for about 45 minutes. He asked me all the right questions to make sure I kind of knew what I was getting into, my reasoning, what my, how I got in there, and he said, yeah, sure, if you move here, I'll work with you. I don't think he thought that I would sign a lease on an apartment the next day and just be there within weeks. So I moved to Atlanta May 15th of 2017 and started working with Rabbi Starr, started taking classes at various places, started, I had taken basic Hebrew, but started really intensely, because Robert would always say, you need to work on your Hebrew. At all these holidays, he kind of would look at me like, you need to work on your Hebrew. And I really became part of the community. And as Robert is fond of saying, a lot of this is just showing up. Be in their faces as much as you can. And that is true. Getting integrated into a community, taking part, being of service. Before you know it, you have a second family. You have a real second home. So in terms of, people always want to know, like, well, what happens? What is the process? Because everyone would ask me, like, when will you be done? I wish I knew. There's a lot of ambiguity in the process, which ambiguity for me is the hardest state to deal with. I want to know what's going to happen, when. I don't like these question marks hanging over everything. So, you go to services, you take things on. Every rabbi I've ever spoken to about this said, don't try to take on everything at once. As Rabbi Starr put it, easy come, easy go. And you will, people that take things on very quickly leap out very quickly. So that was comforting to know that I didn't have to start my effort to say, 100 brachot a day immediately. It was uncomfortable in a lot of ways, but so is much of life. It's not about pursuing comfort, that idea that all the magic happens outside of our comfort zone. It was very inspiring. My learning, which I really love learning, I just read so much and had so many conversations that opened up entire new ways of thinking. I changed my mind about a lot of things. So it's just been wonderful from that respect, and I've been very supported by a surprising amount of people, because I don't know how I would feel myself if I was born Jewish and somebody converted. I think that I might have a snobbish kind of like, oh, not like a real Jew, which is really nothing to ever say to somebody who's a convert. But, I was surprised at how welcoming and encouraging people were and wanted me to do well. Then there were kind of the intrusive questions like, are you crazy? What are you running from? You're not secretly dating a Jew, are you? And this is, oh, you're doing this. And again, are you crazy? That one will come up more than ever. So I read a quote from somebody online about this being asked if you're crazy all the time. And she said, we're not here to help you figure out why you can't imagine that people would find Judaism so amazing that they turn their lives upside down just to be a part of it. So I think that, a lot of Jews have been very honest with me and say, I don't know if I wasn't born Jewish if I would do all this. So I think that in terms of, what you're doing, it makes people sometimes think about themselves, and there can be some hostility but I've gotten very little of that. So the one thing I found is that a lot of people don't realize that telling people that somebody is a convert is a no-no. Just in terms of it's their story to tell. It's their information to disclose. And kind of it's don't ask, don't tell. I do go down these really funny circuits where people say, what's your name? Okay, where are you from? What rabbis have you been to? And I said, my parents weren't observant. That's kind of how I put it. So, because they're trying to figure out, like, what did, So I think that, I don't feel like I've been judged in terms of, somebody standing there with a clipboard and, seeing how long my skirt is, or, if I'm bowing correctly when I'm davening. But, I kind of feel like with everything in life, there are things that are, my business, their business, and God's business. So I just try to focus on my business and ignore the rest. I would say that if you meet somebody who you know is a convert, don't underestimate how helpful you can be with things. People who have never made a Shabbat dinner, people who have never made a bris, people who've never made a wedding, it can make all the difference to have somebody offer to help and guide you and kind of show you the ropes. So that's a good way to be of service and, love the ger. And also it's, honestly, when you do this, you lose a family in a sense. As I remember Bethany Mandel saying, I'll never eat, Passover meal, a Seder at my family's house because, if they don't keep, kosher. So in ways, it's just you lose a lot of that. So it's so great to have people that really treat you like family, and that's not instant. You have to have a certain chemistry with people, and they need to get you and you get them, and then it happens, but it's very meaningful. So although the Talmud says, Eruvin 54a, I looked it up, quote, one who is walking on his way and has no companion should occupy himself with Torah study. So despite that, I would say also keep your eyes peeled for a shidduch, for people who are coming in single. Please don't just think about matching them up with other converts. It's amazing how many people have said to me, like, what kind of, Karen, thank you, what kind of guy are you looking for? Like, and people really are I have people looking for me in Israel that know me, and Karen's brother and his wife, and it's nice to know people are looking. And I think that one thing people have told me is that watching converts has kind of helped them grow in their own Yiddishkeit, because they say, if you're willing to take all this on, and I know how to do it, you don't even know how to do it, like, it's not that much extra effort for me. And I really liked what Jonathan shared about Asher Yatzar, because I'm staying in Ariel's room while I'm here, which I started crying when Robert told me that. But he has this laminated, poster on one of his cabinets that talks about, let's say you do this 6 times a day. It's 120 seconds a day to do this, and why it's important to do it, and read it, and have the proper kavanah. It made a big impression on me. So hearing that from Jonathan really made sense. So Ava Arielle is a name inspired by Ariel. Last year, Robert and Karen asked me if I would take, Ariel's name as one of my names, which was, incredibly, it's a huge honor. It's also very daunting because Ariel, like, how could anybody ever live up to that, live up to that name? And I was really struggling to come up with a first name. I wanted it to be meaningful. I also wanted to like it. And when I sent Robert and Karen my short list of names that I like, Robert called me immediately and he said, "These are too weird." He said, "Some of these names you've never even heard of. I don't even know, like, born Jews that have these names. What is this?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know. I don't want to have the same name that, that all my friends are like, there's Shoshana G and Shoshana B and Shoshana, like, in their classes. You don't want to," although I love the name Shoshana. So I said to Robert, I'm like, it'll all sort itself out. Like, don't worry. But I was worried. So it's kind of hard not to feel like Ariel had some hand in sorting it out, because last Sunday I had this memory of that Ariel had wanted to have 5 daughters, and he had picked out names for all of them. So I was like, okay, let me go look and see what these names are. And 3 of them, there was no way. And 2 of them I liked, and after some back and forth with Robert and Karen, settled on Ahava. And, I really love Ariel and the different ways that you can read that, which you're all smart and good at Hebrew, so I don't have to explain that to you. But I always want to know the meaning behind things, like deeper meaning. So I had to do some digging into the deeper meaning of ahava. Like, I knew that it was about more than just love. Nothing's ever just superficial, and there's nothing else to say about it. So I found this, and I wish I had noted where I got it from, but I didn't. The word ehad symbolizes unity, oneness, attachment. The numerical value of the word ehad is 13, and the value of ahava is also 13. If we add ehad to ahava, the result is 26, the same numerical value as the 4-letter name of God. Rabbis have suggested that this teaches us a big lesson. When one person attaches to another person with closeness and love, it ultimately leads to the same relationship with God. So, I don't know if you can attach to someone with closeness and love who you've never met. I never met Ariel. I only met the Avrechs, after he had passed, and as a result of reading Robert's tributes to Ariel. So the closest I've ever gotten to his physical being was when I went to visit his kaver in Israel last year, but I know that Ariel is not there. It's physicality. But through his family and the really amazing work that they've done to make sure that people know about Ariel and who he was. To make sure that his essence is articulated and known in the world. I have felt a sense of closeness and love with him really for over a decade. So Rabbi Sachs wrote in his drash about the Parsha 2 weeks ago, something that I thought was really powerful. He said, Judaism has foundational beliefs, to be sure, but it is fundamentally about something else altogether. For us, faith is the redemption of solitude. It is about relationships between us and God, us and our family, us and our neighbors, us and our people, us and humankind. Judaism is not about the lonely soul. It is about the bonds that bind us to one another and to the author of all. It is, in the highest sense, about friendship. Hence the life-changing idea, we tend to become what our friends are. So choose as friends people who are what you aspire to be. So a friend of mine said to me, after I told her, she's in Philly, but I sent her a message saying that my conversion happened on Thursday, and she said, I'm so excited for you to live the life your neshama already knew was yours. I really pray for us all to have friends like Ariel and the Avrechs who have shown me really, what I want to be. So.
Take any questions if you have.
Hi. Robert, I told you that'd be the first question. I don't want to speak on behalf of my parents. They are very religious Christians. We've not talked about it. They know that I keep kosher. I brought all my own food to their house. They know about all my learning. They know that I go to shul. They know, so they know, but we've never had the conversation. And I kind of think that's for the best. If they ever ask me about it, I will tell them without reservation. But some things are, in their own time, if ever. So I wouldn't want to speak about how they feel about any of this. And I would just say, imagine if one of your children, God forbid, took a similar route, like how you would feel. So I'm sure, very deeply hurt. Hi.
What kind of a guy would you like to meet?
Funny you should ask. Somebody who has the highest integrity and trustworthiness and doesn't mind talking about Torah a lot. I'll be 41 next month, so realistically, somebody probably who's divorced with children or a widower with children. I'd like to be, a mother in some way. So height is not an issue for me. I'm 6 feet tall, but somebody who's, a mensch. Hi.
Me?
Yes.
Recently in our local papers, we're reading about Michael Chabon, who put down Orthodoxy or Judaism altogether. What would you say to Michael Chabon?
Get curious. Get curious. I think, I sometimes hear people who are Jewish who are not Orthodox, and they quote things and they take it at a very superficial level. And Judaism is like the opposite of superficial. It's digging into everything. And what is, probing for deeper meaning is, what we're commanded to do. And I've been in, Torah study groups where we spend 2 hours just on one word. Are we ever going to get through this verse, let alone this chapter or this book? So I would say get curious, because one example I shared last night was, or at lunch yesterday, excuse me, was someone saying, a Jewish person, the chosen people. Like, come on, I just can't. And I just thought, if you did 20 minutes of reading on this, you would understand kind of the context and what that is really speaking about, and that there are different opinions even. But to take things at a superficial level, I think, for me, I hope I always remain a beginner in my mind, because one of the things I love is when there's stuff to learn, there's a reason to wake up every day. And, I'll never be able to learn everything there is to learn. So when people, have those opinions, I think, again, it's like my business, their business, God's business. I feel like it's God's business, whatever somebody thinks, but I would encourage them to get intellectually curious and humble and learn. So, hi.
First of all, I must tell you that I think you chose a great religion.
Woo!
My only question to you is that besides all the greatness of Judaism, there's a long history of Jews not faring so kindly in the world. Did that give you any hesitation?
No. But I think it's because of my life experience, which I won't get into, but from a very young age feeling, gosh, like, why is it so hard? Is it this hard for everybody? And kind of, things that were out of my control. When you're a child, you have no control over who's making the rules for you and whether they have your best interest at heart. And I just really wanted to hurry up and be an adult. So that's one of the reasons that, the story of the Jews really resonated with me. Of all of hardship doesn't begin to even describe it, that has been overcome, and to persist and to survive and to have this continuity, far outlasting civilizations that were supposedly more sophisticated and were going to be here forever. And, I heard Rabbi Sachs speak at YU in October, and he was talking about the fact that they did a poll of Jewish teenagers, and some really upsetting percentage, they asked them, what do you think of? What's the first thing you think of when you think of being Jewish? And something like 80% of them said the Holocaust. And Rabbi Sachs said, while we absolutely have to remember and make sure this doesn't happen and talk about it, he said, we really also need to inspire this younger generation with the achievements and just the miracles and overcoming the odds and, thousands and thousands of years of continuity. And I know people who aren't particularly religious, but they want to keep it going. So they're going to marry, they intend to marry a Jew and keep it going and raise their children with that. So I think, that really never factored into my thinking. Although I'm very aware of it, it's not something that could have persuaded me away from, like I said, the life of my neshama always knew I was supposed to be living. So, hi. Oh, Karen. Priorities.
I have a question I could ask you anytime, but I'd like a public forum. I find, like last night I read an article about somebody's conversion story, and I said to myself, oh, I should show this to, it was in the Jewish Journal, I should show this to Jackie. But then I didn't, because how do you avoid, like, just being, because of what you've gone through, how do you avoid not being brute convert? Like, you don't want people to fix you up with people just because he's also a convert, but how do you, but you were also helped so much by somebody who went through the process. So it seems to me like a very fine line to walk, like how much to share with you about other people who've had similar experiences. And can you give us some guidance about that?
Right. I mean, for me, again, it's easy for me because it's my story and my information to disclose. It's when other people start telling your story and not always getting it right that's, and disclosing that. But, kind of like I said, it is difficult. If anybody else had asked me, mostly because of the perpetuity of the internet and the video, but if anybody else had asked me, I wouldn't, have wanted to do this. But then when I accepted it, I thought, what, it is an opportunity to help somebody else. And I think that probably for the rest of my life, I will be trying to find that balance. I can influence how people perceive me but I don't have any control over it. And I think that, like that quote that I had from, about Abraham, didn't know where he was going. And he just had to submit to God's will. And in the same way, I kind of have a thing that every day I say, show me your will for me and give me the strength and the courage to carry it out. And I think that's part of it. I can influence it, but I can't control it. So I think I'll probably struggle with that forever. And you'll hear a lot about it. Hi. Oh, wait, sorry. The guy in the back had his hand up first. I don't know who you.
So we have this unique tradition in Judaism where we seem to always beat each other up. Jews constantly criticize Israel. Jews criticize Judaism. Even within Orthodoxy, you got open Orthodoxy and all these different sort of sources of division. First of all, are you aware of all this?
Oh, yeah.
And,
Let you know who I'm close friends with.
yeah, crazy. I mean,
Even if I didn't read a newspaper right now.
Good. I hope it's not going to turn you off too much, but how are you going to manage this sort of deep internal divisions that seems to be endemic to Judaism and the Jewish people?
Well, I think, firstly, it's not mine to manage, which is very liberating. It's out of my hands. I read things and I have feelings about them. I have opinions about them. I try to put my feelings and opinions in a proper context. And again, to remind myself that I can't control what's going on. That saying, not my circus, not my monkeys. I kind of have a full-time job keeping myself on the straight and narrow. But of course I have opinions, and of course I have feelings about that. And I just, like I said, it's even with starting with a conservative conversion, and something, Rabbi Steinberg said to me once, because we were talking about just different denominations, and, he said there is something about the idea that other Jews kind of wish you didn't exist because you're not Orthodox. And how do you balance that with the fact that that shul did so much for me and was really, an integral part of it. And it's not the way I want to hold. It's not the way I want to practice. But it, is part of what brought me here. So I don't know what's best for other people. I don't know, really, ultimately, I don't know what's best for myself. I have to ask for that kind of guidance. I think that it would just be overwhelming to me to try to have too much of a focus on that, because I don't know if any of you get involved with kind of shul behind the scenes, like boards, and it's not just shul, it's any nonprofit or group, and that's where you really get to see people. And I would say it's easy to be a mensch in shul, but the rubber meets the road when you walk outside. So I just really need to keep the focus on myself and me doing the next right thing, and what other people do. I can have opinions and feelings about it, but it's out of my control. Hi.
I'm just curious, what kind of pushback, positive or negative, you get from your friends, particularly non-Jewish friends? Do they get involved with it?
Really, the things I've gotten are, some people are just so thrilled for me, usually ones who aren't religious at all. I have a good Irish friend who's, in Ireland, they've had a lot of kind of scandals, and a lot of people have distanced themselves from, those institutions, and, and she's so excited for me, and sent me a very, made me laugh. She sent me a message, said Mazel Tov, but it was Maseltoff, and she said, I don't know how to spell it, but Mazel Tov. Which was very, I've had friends, my best friend from high school said, does this mean that we can't be friends anymore? Do you think poorly of me because I'm a Christian? Like, no, you do you. It's, and one of the things Rabbi Starr, the guidance, or he said this, and it gave me an idea of when I was, it's tough when the month of December comes up. What do you do? And I decided to send my parents a gigantic package of Omaha non-kosher steaks. To say to them, I'm not judging what you're doing. This is what I'm doing. And it's not like that. And I think particularly people coming from a Christian background, which is, kind of you have to be Christian to have a share in the world to come. And actually Karen's father at that Shabbat dinner was the first one who told me, like, no, we don't think that, and kind of explained to me. So I think it's just, I've not had any, why are you doing this? I've been really amazed, even some of my hardcore fundamentalist atheist friends have been really happy for me. And a friend of mine, Amy Alcon, she's a very controversial writer, hardcore atheist, but she grew up, Reformed, and she said, a lot of my wanting to help people is because of the values I learned in shul. So I think this is really great for you. So I've been surprised. Hi.
Do you realize how inspiring you are to other folks who are Jewish?
Oh, thank you. That's so nice. All I can do is just share my experience, and people will take from it what they take from it. But like I said, if I can help somebody who's either going through the experience or who wants to know how to love the ger, I will do that.
I'm sure Jackie will make herself available to all of you.
I wish I had copies of my shidduch resume.
So, Rabbi Avi Stewart, who is Ariel's one of his closest friends, is going to say the Kel Malei Rachamim, and then I will say Kaddish D'Rabbanan, and then food.
El Malei Rachamim Shoichein B'Merayim Hametzei B'Maluis Kedoshim U'Teorim Ki Zohar Ha'Masirim Es Nishmas Ariel Chaim Ben Ruven Yaakov Shehalach Li'olamoi Ba'avur Shemishpachto Yittein Tzaka Mi'anazkaras Nishmaso B'Gan Eden Tehei Menuchaso Lachein Ba'al Rachamim Yaskireo B'Seisek Inafav Li'olamim V'yitzror B'tzor HaChayim Es Nishmasoi Adonai Unachalasoi V'yanuach B'shalom HaMishkavo V'nomar Amen.
Gadal Yisgadash Shmei Rabbah, Yamad V'Rafir Teviam Lichmach V'Tei, Hayechon V'Yemechon V'Chei V'Chobei Yisrael Bagalav Zman Karib Yimru. Amen. Shmei Rabbah Mavarach V'Elam V'Me'am Barach Yishtabach V'Bar V'Tramam V'Taseh יתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלל שווה קודשה בריחו אלא מכל ברכתה ושירתה שפחתה ונחמתה תמירה ואמר לברוא בן ישראל ועל רבנן ועל תלמידיהם ועל כל תלמידיהם ועל כל מאן דעסקין ויורתה דיבה התרהתה ודיבה כל אתר ואתר והלהון על כל שלמה רבה חיל וחסדה ורחמים בחיינו וריחינו בסנה ורפיחי ורקן מן קדם אבוהון דבשמיא ואמרו אמן יש שלמה רב מן שמיים וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן ועשה שלום ואמרו מה ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. Thank you all so much. Please come to brunch.